titled Ecosystems for Food Security, Scaling Up via the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, organized by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, the FAO. The United Nations General Assembly declared 2021 to 2030 as the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration and invited UNEP, the United Nations Environment Programme, and FAO to spearhead its implementation. Under this role, FAO leads collective efforts on monitoring and practices. Likewise, FAO is a collaboration with partners, supports several UN Decade World Restoration flagship initiatives, and has launched the 15th meeting in the Conference of Parties, the Convention on Biological Diversity, in late 2022. FAO takes a particularly active role in farming a vision and the implementation of the decade for systems we rely on for food, feed, and fiber production. Before passing the word on to our first speaker, allow me to outline the overall shape of our event today. The primary objective of the session is to showcase the innovative tools and products to monitor, progress, and share the best practices developed through the collaborative efforts in the FAO. The event will also showcase the prominent world restoration flagship initiatives that we have, as well as the spaces of and the objectives of climate, biodiversity, and food system information. The progress that is related to the Green Climate Fund projects will also be highlighted during the program. And to achieve the objectives, we'll also hear from our distinguished panelists from the international organization and national governments. To open the session, I have the pleasure to invite Mr. Ximin Wu, the Director of the Forestry Division at FAO, who will provide the opening remarks on behalf of Ms. Maria Helena Semodo, the Deputy Director General of FAO. You have the floor, sir.
Distinguished delegates, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, so warm welcome to this special event on ecosystem restoration to combat climate change, biodiversity loss, and food insecurity, actually by scaling up through UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. And as you may know that actually, if we were to achieve the 2030 agenda, especially the global forest goals, the 3% increase of forest cover by 2030, we need to establish another 180 million hectares of new forests. And also we have 2 billion hectares of degraded land worldwide, and 115 governments have committed, right, to restore 1 billion hectares of degraded ecosystems by 2030. So all these are great commitments, very ambitious targets, but it's time for us to actually transform all these ambitions into actions on the ground. Right? Ecosystem restoration, inclusive of, say, terrestrial, inland water, coastal or marine ecosystem, is a powerful solution to climate change, to biodiversity loss, to land degradation, and actually ecosystem restoration also contributes to the increasing production and resilience of people, and also the nature, right, including the landslides and sea slides. Actually, within this context, that the UN has proclaimed the decade 21 to 30 as a decade on ecosystem restoration on the 1st of March 2019. And as co-lead of this UN decade, FAO and UNEP, we have been doing quite a lot in the past 3 years. And from FAO side, we have actually working with partners, right, on the actually development, of course, together with UNEP and other partners, the release of this say strategy and also the action plans, as well as actually we have launched the joint program, say, for the World Restoration Flagship Initiatives. We have developed 10 principles for ecosystem restoration, and we have actually developed also the standards of practice. And as well as we established a global framework or platform for monitoring the progress on ecosystem restoration, in addition to those awareness raising and capacity building activities. Right, so we have laid a quite solid foundation, right? So now it's time for us to scale up, right? Because, yeah, taking into account the magnitude of the task in front of us, right? We need to carry out ecosystem restoration at scale, right? Of course, we are inclusive. We need to do it at the community level with indigenous people, but we need to advocate ecosystem restoration at scale. So we need to actually to do this scaling up through those 3 pathways, right? To make this ecosystem restoration a global movement and to mobilize the political will of governments. The governments are on the driver's seat, right? We are here actually to provide technical assistance and say to help them to facilitate the process. And also we need to do more in training and capacity building. So that's actually those 3 pathways identified in the strategy for this ecosystem restoration of the decade. And this special event actually provides a very good opportunity for all the stakeholders to stay together and say share best practices, experiences, and also brainstorm on future actions, right? Our next steps. And actually 2030 is not far from us, only 7 years left. And I think according to scientists, right, to 2030 is the last chance for the humanity to avoid the climate catastrophe. So we don't have other choices or options than scaling up what we are doing now. So for the benefit of people and nature. So I look forward very much to the fruitful discussions today, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wu, for again highlighting the need for urgent action, as well as reminding the reason that why we are in this space. I would now invite Ms. Maria Atala, the head of Nature and Climate branch from the UNEP, who will highlight the UNEP's crucial role in supporting the implementation of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and a great pleasure for me to be here. Today is Nature Day. It's a big day for UNEP. It's a big day for my team as well. So my apologies in advance for having to deliver this and run straight away to another event also on ecosystem restoration. Rather than highlighting UNEP's role, I would like to highlight the role of ecosystems. Today we are at the last stretch of the negotiations here at the COP. The global stocktake is being discussed. The global goal on adaptation is being discussed. UNEP published the emissions gap report back in November, where it is clear that without the forest and land use sector, we will not be achieving the 1.5 degrees. And so it's not anymore about we either do offsets via nature-based solutions or we do abatement in the high greenhouse gas intensity sectors. It's about doing both at the same time. And ecosystem restoration is absolutely critical for delivering on the 1.5 degrees. However, ecosystem restoration, and if I dare say, of all ecosystems, for all species, everywhere, is absolutely critical as well. because we cannot talk about resilient societies, we cannot talk about resilient economies without talking about resilient ecosystems. And that is really critical for the global goal on adaptation. We're not talking about a 30 by 30 target. The global biodiversity framework is critical, is important for those safe havens for species that are at risk, that are vulnerable, but ecosystems, every single ecosystem, every single species is critical for human survival. We cannot have human survival without ecosystem functions, such as water storage, regulation of water resources, retention of soils, regeneration of soils. And so this is why the UN Decade, with its 200 plus partners, is absolutely fundamental to achieving those goals. We will not be able to achieve it as international organizations alone, as governments alone, as non-state actors alone. We all need to come together. And maybe I can share a couple of, with these past, how many years? 3 years now of the UN Decade operating, some of the ingredients of success. At the Montreal COP, we had launched 10 World Ecosystem Restoration flagships. Among them, we have some colleagues here that I would like to acknowledge from Vanuatu. It is absolutely important that there be a long-term vision, because ecosystem restoration is not about a quick fix. Nature doesn't go by our pace. We need to go by nature's pace. So we need to align our vision to the pace of nature. We need to have a long-term vision. And it's really about a marathon more than a sprint, if I may say. Second thing that we've seen across the 10 world flagships is that there's always that ingredient of bottom meets up, of communities meet government, of government supports communities, creates the enabling environment, enables that action on the ground, and without that, the two coming together, ecosystem restoration is going to be short-lived. The third ingredient is really about ownership and responsiveness to needs. I may have an idea about what Mauritania needs in order to achieve its targets under the Great Green Wall, for example. Great Green Wall is one of our 10 World Restoration flagships. But is it really and truly what the Mauritanian government needs and what the Mauritanian communities need? And that is where we really need to conduct those approaches of co-creation, of thinking together, of aligning ourselves to the objectives that we have, and more importantly, of embedding social and economic aspects and dimensions into ecosystem restoration. If we go back to the definition of ecosystems, it's about nature, societies, and economies that compose them. And we cannot have a single focus on nature and discarding the focus on social and economic dimensions. Fourth one is we actually need adaptive approaches. For the time being, what we are doing in ecosystem restoration is restoring as it was in the past. That's the overarching idea, is how was that space in the past? And actually, how do we want it? We're striving to restore it as it was. If we look at the IPCC reports, almost 4,000 species have already shifted in terms of latitude. So we need to be restoring for the future rather than restoring for the past. Maybe we need to be forestoring rather than restoring, but that's not in the dictionary yet. And so that means that we need to be very flexible. We need to have an objective in mind without necessarily being very hung up on it. We need to be adaptive in our approaches. We need to change to the wave and to the ebbs and flows of the ecosystems that we're supporting. And lastly, of course, I cannot conclude the ingredients without talking about finance. UNEP launched today the State of Finance for Nature report in the third iteration. Before that, we had been only looking at finance going for nature. And then the question would always come up, but how can we triple this finance? Where will the sources of funding come? So in this iteration, what we did is look at finance that is supporting nature, and we also looked at financial flows, and that's in the order of 200 billion a year. And generally I get the, wow, that's a lot. The reality is that financial flows going against nature or destroying nature directly are 7 trillion. So that's 7 trillion of financial flows destroying nature versus 200 billion supporting nature. We need to shift that balance. So the money is there, it's just not going where it needs to go. And I think one of our joint advocacy with FAO, with the World Restoration Flagships, is actually to help those financial flows go towards the World Restoration Flagships, towards those efforts, and support these wonderful initiatives. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much again, Ms. Marie, to again highlight the nexus in which nature operates, its society, economies, and then nature. I would now like to invite, after the presentations by the FAO and UNEP roles, Dr. Bapon Fakhruddin, the Water Resource Management Senior Specialist here at GCF.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be here. I think as we heard from previous two speakers, some of the good practices and the incubator that has been FAO and UNEP jointly demonstrated and how we can actually scaling up those activities. And I think GCF, one of the largest finance as a climate financer, as an opportunity for organization or countries to scaling up those incubator into an acceleration. And this is the opportunity that countries should actually take. We also congratulate FAO and UNEP to building those tools and technology that are available for the countries to analyze and utilize. But one thing we need to also understand that if we want to achieve the UN decade for ecosystem restoration by 30 by 30, it has a lot of interlinkage and interlinked with other framework. Those are trying to achieve at the same space. So if you look at total 5, Kunming framework, together with the Sendai, Paris Agreement, our new urban agenda, as well as sustainable development goal. So these are all actually intertwined and interlinked. So if one fails, another will be shortage. So how actually we need to create an ecosystem where actually the interlinkage activity is done, that is quite important. So which means, again, actually the partnership, that how we actually partner horizontally, but as well as vertically. But people need to be part of it, so that means which is people-centered approach need to be together. And also how we actually create a healing system. The nature-based solution is a good, but always actually to finding a business solution, business case is complicated because you cannot actually always find a cost-benefit analysis on ecosystem-based restoration or nature-based solution. So how actually we bring those on board is actually quite important. As a GCF, 50% of our investment is actually nature-based solutions over the first GCF1, and we have a similar commitment over the next 4 years in our GCF2 to programming and support to the countries. There has been tremendous example that UNEP just presented, a couple of the projects that GCF supported, and we'd like to see actually more and more countries actually support or engage on those kind of activities, especially with our most vulnerable countries. Africa as well as SIDS and Pacific countries are quite heart of it because these are actually quite acute needs for the countries. And also there are a lot of cascading and compounding impact. So maybe we'll have one particular event, but that actually creating a cascading impact to our ecosystem, which we actually don't actually often consider into our assessment. So how actually do that kind of comprehensive assessment is also quite important to look at. So with these things, I'd like to thanks again for inviting GCF. As you maybe know that the pledge is within the COP, it's a $12.8 billion has been promised. So I think we can do a quite good work together to ensuring that how we can achieve our 2030 goals. And also our executive director has been announced that we like to achieve a 50 billion investment over the 2030, which is 50 for 30. So we hope that with that kind of finance mobilized, we can actually creating a catalytic environment to harnessing research into practice, incubator into accelerator, and also create a greater impact to saving people's lives and livelihood. With this, I'd like to thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Bhavan, for again highlighting the reality of the world that we face, the dichotomy outside the world of this little speaking space that lies outside. So thank you again for bringing those perspectives. I now am pleased to have the word again given to Mr. Jimin Wu, the Director of FAO, and we will go deeper into the thematic of the session, which will be the presentation on sharing best practices and monitoring progress through the UN Decade.
Okay, I have too many roles today, right? Yeah, because we have limited number of people from our division. But anyway, yes, I want to share with you actually what we have been doing with this UN Decade. And as we know that March the 1st, 2019, UN General Assembly adopted a resolution and to support and scale up efforts to prevent, hold, and reverse degradation of the ecosystem worldwide. And FAO and UNEP were actually designated as two co-lead of this initiative. And September 2020, we completed and released the strategy for this UN Decade, which basically contains of three sections and identified actually the three pathways that I just mentioned a few minutes ago. And the vision of the UN Decade is a world where actually for the health and well-being of all life on Earth and that of nature, that of future generations, actually is to restore actually the relationship between the humanity and nature, and also to increase the area of healthy ecosystems, and also to reverse actually the degradation of the forest and other ecosystems. So those are three, to me, very ambitious targets. And yeah, before actually the session, we were talking about the Kunming-Montreal process, also the target to 30%. We thought it's ambitious, and this is as ambitious as the one. Right, but we need ambitious targets, right? As I said, there is a will, there is a way. So if we can mobilize the will and the passion of the government, right, of the politicians, of the public, then nothing is impossible. So these are the three pathways. So to build a global movement, and through actually awareness raising and likewise the campaigns. And secondly is the general political support, which is the core actually of the efforts that we have been doing. And then it's a technical support to members and to the partners who are implementing the UN Decade. So those are the three pathways. And we have actually identified 12 themes and 31 actually challenges, right, in this strategy. I will not mention those specifics. And how to move from commitment to actions on the ground. Then say the FAO, UNDP, and our partners have jointly launched a program called World Restoration Flagship Initiative. And so the three major criteria, right, to assess, right, who will be the final selected initiatives, right? So the first criteria is the first and the best and most promising examples of large-scale and long-term ecosystem restoration activities or initiatives. So this is the first, best, most promising, and it's large scale and it's long term. And this is very, very strict, right, criteria. I think this reminds me of one quite good examples, which is not listed as the first group, group of, say, global initiative, which is actually the Green Great Wall in China. Green Great Wall, it's a 3 north short belt, right? It's similarly like the Great Green Wall in Africa. But the Green Great Wall in China started 1978. And now China is implementing its 6th phase of that national program. And ultimately, 2050 will be the year of completion of the program. So at the moment, even the president, right, gives high attention and the financial support. It's a national campaign. So I think, and now it's ongoing at this moment. And likewise, we have similar, say, initiatives in other parts of the world, and later the panelists will give you the specific examples. And then second criteria is actually embodying the 10 restoration principles of the UN decade. And then last but not least is inspiring others, right, to undertake the similar initiatives. So it's like a role model, it's a pioneer, it's flagship. So if you can meet these 3 criteria, of course there are others as well, but these are the 3 major ones, then you can be selected as a global world flagship for ecosystem restoration. So we had the call to encourage countries to nominate these world restoration flagship initiatives. And December 2022, we announced actually the first group of 10 flagship initiatives at CBD COP15. And 2 months later, we'll actually announce the very limited number of flagships that will receive targeted support, financial and technical. Financial is, say, probably a limited number of say, initiatives that will receive probably $200,000 per initiative. But there are probably a few initiatives that will receive probably up to $5 million financial support. And then sometime next year, with the dates to be determined, to be confirmed, we'll launch actually the second call for new flagship initiatives. And the countries are encouraged to nominate. So this FAO is now currently working with 3 actually regional initiatives together with, of course, the other, say, partners. And FAO is also leading 2 task forces, one on the standards of practice, and the other is on the monitoring. It's on the firm. It's a framework of monitoring of the progress of the UN decade. So actually, these are the principles for the decade, right? I won't touch the details. They are quite, general principles. And also, in the standards of practice for the decade, we provide 300 actually recommended practices to assist the members, the partners, right, with developing projects that reflect the 10 principles. And also, these are this actually the standards of practice are organized by components and subcomponents. Actually, at last, workshop on UN Decade, I mentioned to my colleagues that they have too many subcomponents. It's 45 that I simply cannot remember even the components, let alone the implementation of those. So I asked them to actually shorten, reduce the number of subcomponents so that we can be more focused. And actually this, yes, as I say, that's the standards of practice includes the 6 dedicated boxes that I just showed on the previous slides. And also involves a meaningful involvement of the indigenous people, local communities, as well as, say, the youth and women, right? So these are the QR codes through which you can get access to this, say, early released version of this standard of practice. So if you want to scale up the UN Decade, you need actually to strengthen capacity building, knowledge and learning, and we have developed an action plan on that. We have actually learning courses online, and we have been running, say, workshops and actually technical trainings with our partners. So I mentioned that FAO is also leading a task force on monitoring. So we have established an official monitoring platform for the UN Decade to firstly track the global processes of the UN Decade and how much we restored. And also there's a report on the areas of restoration, especially for the, say, Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework Target 2. We just finished our workshop, which has hundreds of participants on actually the implementation and monitoring of Target 2 of this, say, the GBF. And also it's a registry of registration initiatives. At the moment it's 10, and there will be more. And also good practices from all, say, the ecosystems. And also it's a geospatial tool to visualize actually the restoration data. At the same time, it's a search engine, right? If you want to know what the others are doing, you can use this as a search engine for consulting good practices on ecosystem restoration. So this is 30% targets of the GBF, right? And we are working closely with CBD Secretariat and UNEP, yes, on the development of a roadmap to implement and monitor the target 2 of this GBF. So with that, thank you very much. This is what I want to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wu, for again highlighting the importance of monitoring in restoration, as well as all the things in capacity building for resources and knowledge that the FAO is doing with the UN Decade. Now I would like to move on to the contributions of the broader perspective of climate, biodiversity, nature, and food system transformation with the prominent world restoration flagships. Of the 3, we have here the marine and coastal ecosystem restoration in the SIDS. And to provide an overview of the flagship, I now invite Ms. Pauline Basil, the Senior Adaptation Officer within the Ministry of Climate Change, Adaptation, Meteorology, and Geohazards, Energy, Environment, and Disaster Risk Management for Vanuatu, representing the SIDS flagship. You have the floor.
Honorable delegates, esteemed colleagues, and distinguished partners and guests, it is with great honor that I stand before you today as the representative of Vanuatu, a nation intimately familiar with the pressing challenges of global warming, biodiversity loss, and food insecurity. As we gather under the auspices of the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, our collective mission to revitalize our planet's ecosystem has never been more critical. The United Nations General Assembly's declaration of 2021 to 2030 as the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration is a clear call for action. We commend the leadership of UNEP and FAO in spearheading this initiative, which is pivotal in our journey towards a sustainable future. The Framework on Ecosystem Restoration Monitoring, FERM, the GBF target to indicators, and the principle and standards of practice for ecosystem restoration are more than tools. They are beacons guiding our path forward. FAO's collaborative efforts in developing these innovative tools and approaches are commendable. They have laid a solid foundation for monitoring progress and sharing best practices that will undoubtedly enhance our collective efforts. The capacity, knowledge, and learning action plan will serve as an invaluable resource as we strive to build resilient ecosystem. Vanuatu is proud to participate in this transformative endeavor alongside FAO and its partners. We are actively engaged in the World Restoration Flagship initiatives, which resonate deeply with our own national priorities. From the drylands to the oceans, these initiatives represent hope and tangible progress towards ecosystem restoration. Our commitment is evident through several groundbreaking projects, including the Integrated Sustainable Coastal and Land Management Initiative across Kawa, South Pentecost, Efate, Tana, and Anaichom, and the Ecosystem Restoration and Sustainable Land Management in Tonga Island. We are also spearheading the country-led nature-based solution for resilient land and seascape in Vanuatu, encompassing Vanualava, Malo, Ambai, and Eromango. Furthermore, Vanuatu is an active participant in the SIDS flagship initiative alongside St. Lucia and Comoros, focusing on masculine and Ngunapele. This project aligns with the UN Decade's vision and is instrumental in advancing our national goals related to climate change, mitigation, biodiversity conservation, and food security. As we showcase this initiative today, we not only share our progress, but also extend an invitation for knowledge, exchange, and mutual learning. The Green Climate Fund projects associated with these efforts underscore our dedication to a transformative agenda that integrates climate action with ecosystem restoration. Vanuatu stands ready to collaborate with all nations and organizations present here. Together, let us scale up our efforts through the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration to create a future where ecosystems drive in harmony with human development, a future where our children can inherit a world not only restored, but also resilient. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vanuatu, for bringing hope, belief, and actions that actually are sustained throughout in the space again. Before we move on to the closing remarks by Mr. Wu, I would also like to invite if there are any questions on the floor to any of our speakers over here. I see one. Okay, I see two questions. Can we have the mic, or do we just... Thank you so much. It's the lady in the...
Hello. My name is Natasha, and I work with the International Land Coalition. The International Land Coalition is the world's largest coalition of organizations working towards people-centered land governance. And at the International Land Coalition, I lead their work on rangelands and pastoralism. So actually, my question is really to all of our speakers, but to the speaker from FAO here. We know that rangelands cover about over 50% of the land's terrestrial surface. Many of these rangelands are occupied and held, inhabited by pastoralists. We also know that actually pastoralists face dual pressures. So on the one hand, pastoralists are considered culpable for degradation, are considered as people that overgraze their environments, and are leading to desertification. But at the same time, we know that pastoralist environments, especially drylands, are extremely variable and fragile, and so therefore are experiencing extreme climate events such as drought and floods, increasingly so through the effects of climate change and thereby degradation. But still, firstly, the ecosystem restoration agenda does not pay sufficient attention to these environments and these people, these communities, and their custodianship. But at the same time, where there are initiatives in rangelands, oftentimes they tend to subvert pastoral rationality and the way in which they would restore their environments. So often, for example, afforestation projects, large-scale sort of livelihood transition projects that take place in rangelands really tend to, and including the plantation of exotic and invasive species, tend to completely annihilate the sort of restoration potential within pastoral systems itself. So my question really is, given that this knowledge is widespread, given that it is very well known that the old strategies of afforestation and restoration don't work for these environments, how are, the restoration flagships and other initiatives by all of your organizations bearing in mind this very important constituency and land type?
Yes, very good question. And actually, you are talking about what I'm doing now. Yeah, actually, even in the interview, in my interview for this position, right, I expressed the view that forestry in FAO, in FAO, should not only do timber and forest as a timber, right? So forest is the source of food. Forest is also a source of livelihood for all. And actually, that's why I have been working with my teams on the promotion of agroforestry. So we are now developing our, say, FAO forestry roadmap, in which actually agroforestry will be one of our future priorities, right? So there are so many types of agroforestry. Grazing with trees is the type that you mentioned, right, in the rangeland, right? And we are working with our, say, what we call NSAs, is the animal division, and also we work with our land and water division and OCB as well. So the 4 divisions, we are now working together on how to make this silver pastoral, say, integrated approach work in our systems. So, and also I'm the person who is against the argument that agriculture, including say the livestock grazing, say, industry is the main driver of deforestation. I'm not say supporting this kind of argument. I think this is an argument from the point of view of foresters. I said to the foresters, go to the field and ask for the farmers what they think, right? Their first priority is survival and development and livelihood, right? So they don't care whether this is a piece of forest or this is a piece of agriculture, as long as they can survive, as they can get along with the nature, right? So we need to look at this issue in a more holistic, integrated, and probably a bird eye view, right, instead of a sectoral approach. So this is what we are doing also with our, say, the plant division, right, how to actually to integrate these different approaches and also to establish the links with also the trade, the sustainable value chain, right? And including we are working now with the EU and the producers on how to actually adapt to the forthcoming implementation of the EODR, right, which is on deforestation-free product. So I think this is ongoing, but there are still some, say, debates and controversies with regard to the models and types and also the priorities. So I'm glad that you raised this question, but we look forward to our future collaboration if you have the interest and wish. Thank you.
I guess we have time for one more question.
Yeah, thank you very much. She has asked a question that I wanted to ask. I come from Kenya. Over 80% is ASAL, facing the same kind of system, so I don't want to ask it. I was hoping that, I'm still hoping our GCF colleague is around. Oh, sorry. In that case, I don't know. Maybe you can escalate this to him. What I wanted to know is, one of the biggest challenges in terms of investing or even having projects through the GCF is that, one, it is very difficult to come up with a project because you need upfront financing. I know they have done something about it. And then it takes a very long time. I'll give you an example. We have had a project that we have been designing. We did a concept paper in concept note in 2016. We have only just started receiving an indication that finally we'll have a project this year, 8 years later. All right? So there's still a problem. I remember our colleague from FAO indicated that we need finances that are, I think it's from UNEP. We need finances that can make us go at scale. So one of the challenges is that I think GCF needs to be a bit more faster in processing some of these financing resources to be able to come up with the projects. So it's a big concern. And then for FAO, the question I wanted to ask is, the issue around ecosystem restoration began quite a while back, yeah? But it seems not to have gotten a lot of traction. You look at the food systems, for example, it's not so old, but it has gained a lot of traction. We know the importance of ecosystem restoration, but it's not gaining traction. Probably, what is the big issue around that?
Thank you so much for your questions. I would say that the first one would be addressed to Dr. Papun, and we will communicate the same to them. And for the second one, Mr. Wu, would you like to take the floor again?
Okay, I didn't catch the key word. Attraction?
Traction. That means it's not moving.
Right. So basically, I think it's an issue of with regard to the transformation of the agri-food system, right? So yeah, I think it's along with the ecosystem restoration and with the forestation activities, we actually gave also dual emphasis on actually increasing productivity of agriculture, right? And also it's a intersectoral approach that we are adopting, and actually the FAO governing body is calling for agriculture forestry linkages. Yeah, we just actually finished our side event 2 days ago on this subject, that actually FAO will work with member countries and on this interlinkage between agriculture and forestry through actually including the agri-food say approach, and also say other innovative say ways and means, and also from the investment point of view, we are working with our partners and to get more money to finance actually the activities at the community level, to support the small producer organizations and the indigenous group, the indigenous people and communities, to actually to give due emphasis on the conservation and protection of this ecosystem, important ecosystems. Thank you for that.
Thank you again for the questions. Just to add to what Mr. Wu said, there have been some ways that we are, as the former youth representative, there have been some ways that we are making the idea of ecosystem restoration attractive to not just local communities, but also young people. So you have different flyers that go on, songs that go on, you have art challenges, again, in partnership with our partners like the WWF and UNESCO and FAO. Again, we have 3 different challenges working on green jobs, as well as giving them the safety net of working on their own startups together. So there have been actually ways in which it can be more attractive for young people as well to spearhead this challenge of ecosystem restoration along with the different partners. So I think that could also be one of the ways to look at it. But again, I thank everyone for their time and our esteemed speakers. I would now like to move on to the closing of the event, where I would again invite Mr. Wu for the closing remarks.
Right, it should be very short, and yeah, and firstly I would like to thank actually the participant present today for this side event, especially the speakers, and also our excellent moderator, and the interactive the questions and answers. And also I feel that we have general consensus on the importance of ecosystem restoration, and also the general recognition of the work done by FAO and UNEP, and also the strong will actually to work in partnership and together actually in the coming years, and to speed up actually and scale up what we are doing now. Speed up, scaling up, large scale does not necessarily exclude small producer organizations, the communities, and indigenous people. We are talking about one side of the story. On the other side, actually, we have been working very closely with the indigenous people, local communities. We have, say, out of our 15 teams, actually over half, they are working with this, say group of peoples. And also, I feel the urgency, right? The urgency for us to take actions as a group, right? Go along, you go far, right? No, go along, you go faster. Go together, you go far. Yeah, this is what I learned, right? And yes, I firmly believe that with our joint efforts, we will be able to achieve, right, the ambitious targets that we set for ourselves, for the people and for the planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone, again for joining the session. With this, it has come to a close, and I hope to see you guys again. Thank you.